Hey y'all, welcome back to day 5 of this renovation series. Today I'm going to go ahead and finish up this entertainment center, and I'm going to go over a little bit of wiring stuff, so if you're interested in that, keep watching. So I'm going to start out by ripping down some pine boards. I think these are like 2.5 inches. This is going to be the face of the entertainment center, and I got really lucky because I don't know if you guys know that pine board is like stupid expensive. Like, it's ridiculous how much they charge for pine board. But when I was at Home Depot, there was some of these really nice pine boards in like the scrap pile, and so I got them for 70% off, and they only had like little tiny like spots on the end that I could just cut off. I mean, it was great. They were perfectly good. So that's what I used for this. I was pretty excited when I found that out. So right here, I'm just going to cut all of these width pieces. So it's basically 2 sides and then a bunch of pieces in the middle. And you'll see this kind of come together here in just a minute. So there's the 2 side pieces I was telling you about, and here I'm just laying out all of these middle pieces. I do have this drawn out in my notebook, and I'll come back to that in just a second. But you see, I have one there in my hand, and I wasn't really sure where it went, so that's why I got my notebook, and I like to just lay it all out first to make sure it looks right. And it did. So I'm going to go ahead and measure where all of these middle pieces are supposed to go. So like I did last time with the framing, I put the 2 pieces together and then I make my mark to where they need to go. And I use a square to draw a line across both boards. That way I know it's exactly even on both sides. Now for this, I kind of get myself confused sometimes on if the board is supposed to go above the line or below the line. So I kind of try to put like an arrow to which side it needs to go up or if it needs to go down. And it's just helped me keep my mind straight, because sometimes my mind just gets all cattywampus when I'm trying to do too many things at once. Now I like to use pocket holes to join the middle pieces to the outer pieces. There's lots of different ways you can join these together, but this is just the easiest I found. And I mean, everybody can go pick up a pocket hole jig. Not everybody has a biscuit cutter, so that's why I like to do it this way. I've done it both ways, but I mean, honestly, they both turn out the same. So, I mean, it's really your personal preference. Now, something that I usually do is kind of router out an edge. If I need to put like a panel in it, I'll router out a space for the panel to sit inside of the face frame, but I wanted to try something new and try to make it fit inside the frame. So if you've ever built any like cabinet doors or anything like that, you know, you make basically a notch in the middle that the piece of wood will fit directly in. So I thought I'd try it this time, and it worked out pretty good. So this is just me setting up my table saw with my fingerboard and making sure that it is the right thickness. And you basically run the piece of wood through, and then you flip it back around and you run it through again. And that way it makes the hole perfectly even on both sides. So it's centered directly in the wood. And honestly, it doesn't really matter if it's centered for this, because it's just the panel going in and you're only going to see one side anyway. It is more important in like cabinet doors and stuff like that. I try to pay more attention to it, make it perfect. But this is just a panel going in to cover up the electrical and the hot water heater. So I'm honestly not too worried about it. Now these longer boards were a little bit difficult, so I ran the part that I needed the slot in, and then I kind of moved my table saw fence out and made it a little bigger. It's probably not perfectly centered in there, but I mean, it was pretty dang close, and the panel fit in there perfectly. So I mean, I feel like that was a pretty good solution to it, and it fit, so that's all that matters, right? And right here, I'm just laying everything out to make sure that it lines up, and I'm going to start putting these together. So I'm going to start with this bottom piece right here. As you can see, I got my square, and then I'm putting pocket holes or pocket hole screws in my pocket holes. Put just a little bit of glue. Probably didn't need any, but it makes me feel better. And then just assemble it piece by piece, and you see that that piece of wood is actually sliding into the channels that I made, which is really nice. And it just fit perfectly. So I'm just going to keep screwing this in. I did find out by making those channels, the pocket hole screws that I had weren't quite long enough. So I ended up using some, I think it was like 1 7/8" deck screws that I had, and those were actually perfect. And I just got my angle grinder and just grinded the top part off so it sat flush. And if you're wondering why it magically turned white, it's because I ended up flipping the panel around when I realized my screws weren't long enough. So I took it back apart, flipped the panel around because that's like shiny and it's going to be hard to paint, and this is the back side. So anyway, that's why it's white, is I just took it apart and then put it all back together. So just moving right along with this, I'm using those marks that I already made, so I know exactly where these middle pieces are supposed to go. And I'm just putting pocket hole screws in, or deck screws if I have a little channel right there. And right here on this top, if you see right there, that is where the radio is actually going to go. So I went and I did the same thing, cutting out the channels, making sure that that piece fit in there, and then assembling it all together. Now I want to do a test fit on this, but before I can do that, there's actually the wheel well right in this corner right here that I'm working on. And so I'm going to take about 1/2 inch off of the bottom of this. That way it can slide directly in and right over the wheel well. So that's what I'm doing right here. Could I have used a different tool? Yes, I probably could have, but honestly, my extension cord was too far away and I don't want to have to go get it, and that seems like a lot, and my multi-tool was already right there. So anyway, there's no specific reason why I use this tool. It just was convenient. Okay, now that that notch is cut out, we can do a little test fit, and it looks fabulous and wonderful, and it fits perfectly. But there is one more thing I need to do, and if you see, I'm making a little mark with a pencil just where those framing pieces are. I still need to put pieces on the side so the fireplace will fit directly in. So I went ahead and cut some pieces on my table saw to that exact measurement of the lines that I already made. I think it was like 1.5 inches or something on each side. But I'm just putting some glue and some pocket holes in, pocket hole screws, and that is pretty much it for that. So next I'm going to go ahead and start the long and tedious process of sanding, especially sanding all of these joints. This is just 80 grit sandpaper, and I'll go over it with like 220 once I actually finish this and get all the imperfections out and all of the kind of, I don't know, spots where the wood didn't join perfectly. So just sand this as much as possible. I feel like my motto is like, sometimes the more you sand, the better it looks, depending on what you're making. So yeah, it's not enjoyable, but it's worth it when it looks nice and pretty on the end. So next, if you'll see me putting kind of like some glue on these spots right here, and this is sawdust from when I cut the pieces. I just grabbed some from my table saw. I like this method better than like, I don't know, like hole filler or anything like that, because one, it's like cheap, it's literally glue and sawdust, and two, I feel like you can sand it immediately because it dries directly in the crack. So that's just my little tip for you. I always do this on my face frames. It's just super easy, and I just really like it. All right, so next I need to go ahead and cut the hole out for the radio to go in. So this is the radio that I'm putting in. I found this on Amazon. It was like super cheap. It's like 30 bucks. But a radio is a radio, to be honest with you. Your speakers are only as good as the radio too. So what I ended up doing to make sure that my trim piece fit, I was kind of measuring to make sure I could put it as far over as possible because the slide is right there. I ended up cutting out just a little piece of wood that was the same size as the hole that I needed, and then I just traced it. And that was pretty much it. I kind of just made sure it was centered, traced it, and then got my multi-tool and went ahead and cut it out. Nothing too crazy or too fancy about it, just as long as the hole is not too big. It does need to be, pretty close to the actual size, or else it'll kind of just look weird with the trim piece, because the trim piece is really thin. All right, so now that I know that it fits, I'm going to start working on some sort of bracket to attach this to this. And I thought about a couple different ways to do it. You saw me cut some, it's like a metal bracket that I bought off Amazon for something else. And the screw holes ended up matching perfectly. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking a little block of wood with a piece of like 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch wood on it, one for each side. And then I put it up and I kind of mark where the center of my hole is on the bottom. And you see I'm kind of sliding it up. I'm looking where the screw hole is and I'm marking it on the bottom right there. So stay with me here. This is not complicated. It's super easy. It's got to make sense in your head. Okay, now that I have that marked, my next step is actually going to be to kind of draw on top where those center holes were from the side. And this is where this little bracket comes in that I cut off, because it actually has a little square in it or a rectangle that I'm fixing to trace. And I know the exact distance the holes are supposed to be based on that bracket. So sorry about my hair here. I guess I need to do something. But anyway, I'm drilling the holes based off of the bracket. I know one screw goes at the very top of the bracket and then one screw goes at the very bottom. So it seemed in my head logical that it would make sense if I just made these little wooden brackets to do that. And it did fit. Yay! I tried this with a metal bracket before and it just didn't work out like I wanted it to. But I wanted to be able to screw this into the actual frame itself because it's kind of just flimsy wood. So I wanted something a little heftier. That way when you press the buttons, it would fall in. Anyway, but this worked out perfectly. I did actually have a whole box of these screws at my house from when I scavenger random things that I find, any nuts and bolts. I'm like, yeah, those are mine. I'm taking them home. And this is one of those occasions where I finally got to use all of the things that I scavenge. So anyway, I just screw this directly into the back. And now I'm ready to kind of put this face frame in. So I'm cleaning up all this sawdust and stuff beforehand. And it drives me crazy when I open up a cabinet or something in an RV and somebody thinks that nobody's ever going to see it, and then there's sawdust all over the place. And so I always like to clean behind the things that I'm installing, just in case anybody comes behind me and was like, who left sawdust all over the place? It wasn't me, guys. It wasn't me. Now I'm drilling 2 holes at the bottom right here. One is because there's going to be some wires coming out that connect to the slide, and the other is for I'm going to put the LP gas detector there. So I slide this baby in and make sure that it doesn't get caught on anything like it is now, and then it just slides in. And this top part kind of just notches in. It doesn't make any sense when I say it like that, but it sits nice and flush and it's great. So next I'm getting my 16 gauge nailer and just letting her rip with all of the nails. I try to get all of the framing pieces just so they all kind of support each other, even though it's probably not necessary and it's more nail holes to fill, but that's okay. It looks great though. So I obviously did not think ahead, and I had to take that panel back out, and I'll end up screwing it in because I need to work on the wires for this radio that I'm installing. So obviously I can't reuse any of the old connectors, so I cut everything off. And this right here, they actually have a separate, I don't know, it was like a connection in the back that I don't need anymore. So I basically reconnected all of that without the extra wire in it, because I only need one wire, 12-volt wire coming in here, and that is to power the radio. So next we can actually get into it, and if you see right here, I'm kind of pulling the wires to kind of figure out what goes to which speaker, because there's 2 indoor and there's 2 outdoor speakers, so I wanted to make sure I wired it correctly. So the 2 indoor speakers I wired as front, and the 2 outdoor speakers I wired as rear. And this is very important for RVs. If you're installing a car radio, there's actually like a 12-volt power, and then there's a backup power for a car. So every time your car shuts off, you don't lose all the memory. And so you need to join both of those together with the 12 volts in order for this to work. It won't work if there's no reserve. So this will just be constant 12-volt power, pretty much all the time. You can just turn it on if you have your battery plugged in. Now these speaker wires were colored pretty alike. The only difference is one was black and then one was either like a burgundy color or a gray color. And honestly, it doesn't matter which one you pick as your positive and your negative, as long as you wire it as your positive and negative at this wiring right here and at the speakers. So I just went ahead and picked the black for positive every single time. Could I have picked the colored for positive every single time? Yes, I could, but that was just the first one I got. So make sure you do have your positive and your negatives wired correctly on this. And I know it kind of seems like I'm going quick, but I promise you it's really simple if you just look at it and kind of think of the wiring in your head. So this is me just doing the positive and the negative. I'm just stripping the wire, and then this is just little tiny wire crimpers. I like the crimpers better than the nuts just because I just don't like wire nuts. It's my personal preference. And then I'm taping everything up right here just to make it look nice and take a little bit of stress off of any of those wiring. And I'm coming over here and I'm like, why is it not working? Why is it not working? And then I put my hand here and do like this little like tap, like, But I figured it out. It turns out there was a little like a little fuse in the back that had fallen out when I was putting it in. Anyway, that's it for today. This is my dad. He came in to say hi to me and to give me a hug, and he's the best. So if you're ever wondering where I learned everything from, it's that guy right there. Anyway, y'all have a great night.